Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. It's the 4th of March, 2026. And last night was the first set of primaries in the 2026 midterm election cycle. There was a kerfuffle, to say the least, in Dallas County, Texas. And we're going to talk all about it, but I want to give you guys the headline first. What went down in Dallas County, Texas last night is unique to Dallas County. So one of the things that I got to tell you guys just up front is that I know that these sorts of things have a way of spiraling out of control on social media where people are like, look what they did in Dallas County. Now we know it's all going to be chaos for the midterms. Okay, this is why the facts really matter. So I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened. None of it is cool, but it's also unique to Dallas County. So I want everybody to be very careful about how you think about this and don't do the kind of like doom spiral that I know we're all like tempted to do in this era when we discuss what went down. Okay, so last night was the Texas primary for the U.S. Senate seat, and we had Tallarico and Crockett on the Democratic side and Cornyn and Paxton on the Republican side. Ken Paxton, of course, belongs in prison. In fact, like he was convicted of felonies. He was nearly impeached as the Attorney General of the state of Texas. And for some reason, 40% of Republicans still voted for him last night. Cornyn, who of course is the current sitting U.S. Senator, and Paxton are going to a runoff because neither one of them actually got more than 50% of the vote. So that's actually kind of good for Democrats because they're going to be tied up and running against each other until the middle of May. Meanwhile, we do have a resolution on the Democratic primary side. James Tallarico did win the Democratic primary there. Jasmine Crockett conceded this morning. However, last night there was chaos in Dallas County. So let me explain how this works so everybody understands why it is that this is unique to Dallas County and also kind of how messed up it really was. So Dallas County has historically had what are called open primary voting, what's called open primary voting. Essentially, the way that it has historically worked is that there has been an agreement between the Dallas County GOP and the Dallas County Democratic Party that anybody can vote at any polling place in the primaries, okay? But in Dallas County, there has to be an agreement between the Dallas County GOP and the Dallas County Democratic Party that that's the case. And there's never been an instance before yesterday where there wasn't just an agreement that you could show up and vote at any precinct, okay? For early voting, there was an agreement. You could show up at any precinct in Dallas County and early vote. Yesterday, the day of the election, the Dallas County GOP demanded what are called separate primaries. And that means that you have to actually vote in your local precinct, not any precinct, primary-wide, county-wide, okay? And so what that ended up resulting in was an enormous amount of confusion because people who have historically been able to vote at any precinct would show up at a precinct of their choosing only to be told that they could not vote there this time. They had to go vote at their designated precinct or their vote would not be counted. They couldn't actually even vote. And the end result of this was that an enormous number of Democrats, only Democrats, got turned away at various polls and had to go to another precinct in order to vote, okay? Of course, lawyers got very upset about this when they started to hear about this. Lawyers went into court on behalf of the Dallas County Democratic Party and asked for the polls to stay open until 9 o'clock, which was granted. They were supposed to close at 7. Then Ken Paxton, scumbag that he is, appealed that lower court ruling to the Texas County Supreme Court last night and got an injunction throwing out all votes by Democrats in Dallas County after 7 p.m. Now, the end result of this is that it probably didn't matter very much, because the split between, the reason why this was kind of happening, by the way, which is sort of wild, is that Jasmine Crockett's home county is Dallas County. And there are some strange things about this from a political standpoint, like the Texas GOP had been signaling that they wanted to run against Tallarico. That they wanted to run against Crockett, not against Tallarico, because Tallarico would be a harder candidate to beat. And so it didn't make any sense for Paxton, who is, of course, like a candidate on the Republican side of the primary, to want to depress the vote for Jasmine Crockett, right? And there's still a lot of confusion about why he did that, other than disenfranchising Black residents of Dallas County who wanted to support Jasmine Crockett along with others, okay? It kind of doesn't make any sense. But the end result is that the split between Crockett and Tallarico in other parts of the state, and after the votes up until 7 p.m. were counted in Dallas County, was so significant, it was like 6 or 7 percentage points, that it probably wouldn't have mattered if those extra 2 hours of votes had been counted. All right. While all this was going down, there was, of course, a lot of rampant fantasizing on social media of oh, look what they've done in Dallas County. They're going to be able to do this everywhere in November. No, they can't. This is a very unique situation. And I don't want to downplay the fact that there will be attempted rat fuckery in November. There's kind of no question about that, right? If they have an opportunity to fuck around with voter suppression, they are going to do that. Okay. But what happened in Dallas County is unique to Dallas County. And I just want to point out that while the Texas GOP, particularly in the hands of Ken Paxton, it is really scummy in the way that they operate, these types of procedures do not exist in other states. And so I want people to kind of understand the narrowness of what took place, and also understand that simultaneously the GOP is deeply engaged in voter suppression. So this is one reason why I've been telling all of you for years now that you've got to be deeply involved in understanding what voter suppression efforts are underway in your state. Are they limiting the number of precincts that are in predominantly Black districts? Are they trying to pass legislation at a statewide level that prevents people from drinking water or eating in line or bringing a stool to sit on if they have to wait in line for hours, right? Are they, instituting things that are equivalent to a poll tax, which, by the way, is one of the things with the SAVE Act at the federal level. We're going to talk more about that in a second. One of the things that, you have to do is be on top of what voter suppression looks like where you live. But I do want people to be very clear that what took place last night in Dallas County, is not something that is going to be replicable in other counties nationwide. Okay. And again, I'm going to remind everybody, I've said this so many times already, I'm going to say it again. There's 3,144 counties or county equivalents in the United States of America, okay? In order to throw the election in November, you would have to have conspiratorial help in all 3,144 of those jurisdictions. And that's not even including the thousands of precincts that make up those tens of thousands of precincts that fit within those 3,144 counties. Okay. So again, rationality helps here. And I have to say, even though I'm not a fan of Ari Melber, generally speaking, he actually articulated this all very well last night on MS Now. He was like, this is a unique situation. And it is really important that we understand the way elections work, the midterms work, the way in which elections are administered at a county level, because it undercuts a lot of what the GOP is doing right now. And it also makes very plain that a lot of their efforts, like Steve Bannon out there ranting about how there's going to be ICE at every polling place, not only is that impossible, because they simply do not have the manpower, but also what it's actually designed to do is to get people to stay home. You should be afraid of going to vote because there's going to be ICE at every single polling place in America. Impossible. Not going to happen. So again, I want people to kind of see this for what it was, which was Texas GOP fuckery. Yes, I know I'm cursing a lot today, but also understand that this particular set of circumstances is unique to Dallas County. All right. I also just want to say one other thing here. I was going to be happy with how this race came out either way. I love Jasmine Crockett. She's going to continue to serve in the House of Representatives until the end of this year. She did not run for re-election on the primary ballot for the House. So she is not going to be in the House of Representatives come January of next year. But I know that she's got like a long future ahead of her. She's not going anywhere. And she's committed as of this morning to backing Tallarico, to flipping Texas blue, to doing whatever she can to try to, get more progressive Democrats elected. All right. And Tallarico is great. Like he ideologically, he's not very different from Jasmine Crockett. And there's a lot about him that actually I think appeals to a lot of Texas voters. The other thing that I just want to point out, just generally speaking about Texas last night, was that the Democratic voter turnout was exponentially higher than the turnout for Republicans. Like at one point I looked at it last night at like 7 p.m. and it was twice as much. So there is some very positive news coming out of this in Texas on that front. But I will also just add that it was a watershed night in other places when it comes to electing progressive Democrats. So in North Carolina, 2 Democratic North Carolina electeds who had backed anti-trans litigation lost their seats. This is just your message. Like, I know we talk about Newsom a lot here and how much I don't like that guy and how he's willing to throw trans people under the bus. Democratic voters in North Carolina, not the bluest of blue states, right, made their voices heard very loud and clear last night that they are not willing to reelect people who back anti-trans legislation. Like they voted for people who are full-throatedly endorsing trans rights instead. Okay, so that's like a huge message. The other thing is there is a state seat in Arkansas last night, Arkansas, that flipped blue by 29 points compared to the election of Donald Trump. 29 points in Arkansas. It's crazy. So there's an awful lot of, good news coming out of the elections last night. I want people to be very clear on this. There are like various commentators this morning, not people who I like, who were out there saying things like Tallarico winning is a sign that the progressive agenda is dead. Far from it. Like actually quite the opposite. There's really like only a sliver of daylight between Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico in terms of what they stand for. And in the meantime, in other purple to red areas, Dems are like outperforming Republicans nonstop, and particularly progressive Democrats. So I'm really happy with the results overall from last night. I think they are a harbinger that progressives are on the rise, which makes me really happy. And, primary season is officially here. We've got many, many more coming up. So the key right now, I think that, we all kind of need to understand is that very interesting things are possible given where we are. Like there was a lot of discussion inside Texas from Texas commentators and Texas news sources last night about the fact that Texas may actually flip blue, not just in the Senate race, but also in the governor's race. And so again, we're going to have to see how all this plays out. But I'm also just going to remind you all of one thing. The key here, and this is one of the features of elections that I think a lot of people forget, okay? The key here is to elect the best candidate we can and then push that candidate to adopt the policies that we want them to adopt, right? Like people supporting public libraries in New York City, of all places, are not happy with Zohran Mamdani's recent budget announcements. And even though they love Mamdani on everything else, they're organizing to get Mamdani to keep his campaign promises about funding public libraries, right? Doesn't mean he's a bad politician. Doesn't mean they won't vote for him again. But it does mean that our obligation as participants in democracy is to push the people that we elect, the best candidates that we can elect, to adopt policies that we want. So for the people who are out here saying like Tallarico's not for Medicare for all, I don't know, there's a little bit of mixed messaging on that. I'll just be honest about this. Elect him and push him to do it. It's not like there aren't going to be other progressives in the House and the Senate who are going to be like all in on that, assuming that we take back both bodies of Congress. So, we work on it. That's what we do. We work on it. We elect the best possible candidates and then we work on it. Okay. A couple other things we got to talk about. The War Powers Act. So there is going to be a War Powers Act vote sometime in the next 2 days. And this one is really iffy. I'm really unhappy about this. There's apparently 6 pro-Israel Democrats who are trying to put into place an alternative to a war powers vote that would just shut down Trump entirely, shut down the Iran war entirely. Their version would give Trump 30 days to do whatever he wants to do in Iran before congressional oversight would kick in. I don't like that. I don't like that for a whole variety of reasons. All right. I will just say this. It is very important right now that you call your senators and your reps and tell them no war with Iran, right? The War Powers Act resolution must pass. He has entered a war using those words exactly, and all of his surrogates are using those words. Mark Wayne Mullen used them yesterday, to the effect that we have started a war without authorization of Congress, which is illegal. Not that I approve of the war anyway. Even if it was legal, it's not okay to bomb grade schools and to murder, it's 1,045 Iranian civilians have died so far, right? None of it's okay. But it is really important because this vote is looming in the next 48 hours to make your phone calls, okay? We also had some questions about the SAVE Act, which is still hanging out there pending. We all know that it's passed the House. The SAVE Act is more likely than not to be filibustered. And that would mean that the Senate has to get to a 60-vote majority to overrule the filibuster in order to bring it to the floor for a vote. Yes, there has been some noise about the nuclear option, whereby a simple majority, they would overturn the rules of the filibuster purely for this act. But I'm not sure John Thune has the stomach for that right now. So the SAVE Act is also something you should be calling about. You should be calling every senator that matters to you, including your MAGA ones, if you are represented by a MAGA senator, and tell them not to vote for the SAVE Act, that you will literally campaign for the people who run against them, that you will make sure that if they're Democrats, they are primaried if they support the SAVE Act, okay? Because it is going to have, it is the equivalent of a poll tax because it is going to require everybody who has a different name at birth from the one they have now to buy a passport. And we all know that passport processing has been very, very slow, if not shut down at certain points. So it is going to be an extreme limitation on who can vote. And also it is a per se poll tax because it requires you to pay like $120 or more to get your US passport in order to be able to vote, because a real ID is not going to be enough under the SAVE Act. So, we've had a bunch of people on the Patreon feed asking me for advice about this. Until the final SAVE Act passes, which hopefully it will not, there may be attempts to put amendments in it if it actually makes it to the floor. I can't make any recommendations to anybody about what to do. All right. I will just say that it is an incredibly dangerous piece of legislation. And we've got to continue making our phone calls about that. Okay. There is some very good news on the Epstein front that really slid under the radar yesterday because of the primaries and everything that's happening in the war with Iran. But I don't want anybody to miss this, okay? Yesterday, the House Oversight Committee asked to interview a huge list of people named in the Epstein files. People like Leon Black, people like Kathy Rumler, who has resigned now as the general counsel of Goldman Sachs. Other folks who are named in the Epstein files as potential co-conspirators. And they have listed out a series of dates on which they are asking for those public hearings. There will be people who fight that, sure of it. There are probably people who will try to defy subpoenas. Some of those people, if they do show up to testify, will no doubt take the Fifth Amendment. Bill Gates is also on that list. Yes, thank you for mentioning that. We're going to see what happens with this. But I will tell you that this issue is not dead and gone. I keep saying this to everybody, right? Like, the Epstein files are not going away. And also, if you want my feelings about distraction, you can go watch Monday's broadcast where I talked about why the war with Iran and everything else is not a distraction. It's just fascism, right? All that said, there continues to be movement on this front, and it's very significant. So keep an eye on that. All right. Kristi Noem is back on the Hill today. She also was on the Hill yesterday in front of the Senate. Today, she's in front of the House. Jamie Raskin is reading her the Riot Act. But if you happen to miss yesterday's oversight hearing from Senate Oversight of Kristi Noem, I will just tell you that it was a fascinating hearing. Senator Kennedy, the aw shucks guy, right, accused Kristi Noem of corruption. Tom Tillis, who of course isn't running for re-election, but was really out there yesterday, basically saying that she had completely ruined the Department of Homeland Security and all of its oversight responsibility. that she had absolutely desecrated the role. And it was really, really good. This morning, Jamie Raskin is doing something similar, except what he's done this morning, and I'm really glad he danced this close to the fire, has been to talk about the luxury jet that was procured for Kristi Noem through the Big Beautiful Bill, the funding from the Big Beautiful Bill, that has a queen-size bed and 4 flat-screen TVs in the back of it. And also, he talked about this scandal that we learned about last week, where Corey Lewandowski, who is widely rumored to be having an affair with Kristi Noem, was on a flight with her on that plane, and they left her blankie, her heated blanket, behind on another plane, and Corey Lewandowski fired the pilot of the jet midair because he had left behind Kristi Noem's blankie. All of this is happening right now on the Hill. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of good clips coming out of it today, but that's also something to watch. And I will just say that it is interesting watching the GOP start to throw people under the bus. The other thing that was very interesting yesterday, by the way, between Tom Tillis and others, was the way in which Stephen Miller keeps being put at the center of this. Like, there's really now, I would argue, a bipartisan effort to really land the responsibility for ICE and CBP's policies at the feet of Stephen Miller where it belongs. And there were questions about Kristi Noem taking instructions from Stephen Miller in the way that she described Alex Preddy as a domestic terrorist. Really interesting stuff. Signs all around that there is like crumbling support in the MAGA base. And, you know, I'll just point out also, like yesterday, for the first time ever, there was a YouGov poll that came out that said a majority of the United States, a majority, like something like 54%, if I'm remembering it correctly, is now in favor of abolishing ICE, not just defunding it, but full stop abolishing it. Independents, Republicans, and Democrats. That's a fascinating moment. Trump's polling numbers are also like further down than they have ever been. They literally are now below where they were after January 6th. So all sorts of things are falling apart. Okay. Yesterday, Trump threatened to cut off trade with Spain, clearly forgetting that Spain is a part of the EU. I will just say one other thing about this, okay? The president of Spain is out this morning with a statement that you should go see. It's also on my Blue Sky if you want to go look at it, where the president of Spain essentially says, we're not going to have any part in this illegal war in Iran. And what bad leaders do when they can't take care of their people is distract from their own failings by engaging in war. It's really scathing. And basically he's like, we're not going to be intimidated into this. We're not going to be intimidated. So, you know, I don't think we need to say much more about that other than that it was like yet another stupid lashing out by Trump. The one thing that I do want to make sure everybody doesn't miss is now, in addition to military action in Venezuela and an unwarranted, unjustified, illegal, amoral war in Iran, news broke late last night that the U.S. is now also engaged in military operations in Ecuador, where the CIA is apparently participating in some kind of revolutionary assistance inside Ecuador. So we now basically have like 3 wars going on at once at the same time. I don't know what's going to come out of Ecuador. Ecuador actually sounds like it's much more of a covert ops kind of situation. Not very covert anymore now that it's been on the front page of the New York Times. But I just want everybody to be aware that one of the challenges of the War Powers Act resolution at this point is that if Trump is not stopped by the Congress this time around with this massive invasion of Iran that has now set off retaliatory strikes all over the Middle East, where they are now telling Americans to literally leave the entire Middle East, but don't rely on the State Department for help. That's the other thing that happened yesterday. It was like the State Department put out a thing saying, you should leave, but don't call us asking for help because we can't help you. Airspace is shut over the vast majority of the Middle East. All that said, if he is not stopped, this will go on in other places. Right? And it will continue to go on in other places because it makes Trump feel good, right? The one thing I will point out is that the narratives, of course, and the situation are spinning wildly out of control. Like first it was Israel talked us into doing this. Then Trump made a statement that said, I talked Israel into doing this. I forced their hand was the language that he used. First it's like, we want regime change. Then it's like, well, we knew that if Israel struck Iran, they would strike back at the United States. So there was an immediate threat, which doesn't make any sense, right? That's like the bully in the playground saying like, I had to punch you because if I punched your friend, that friend would have punched me back. Makes no sense, right? There's no exit strategy. They had no plan to get Americans out of the Middle East very clearly. Trump said that yesterday. We didn't have a plan on this. We didn't realize that airspace was going to be shut down. What do we do now, right? And the successor to the Supreme Leader, by the way, was announced yesterday, is his son, whose wife and child, in addition to his own father, were murdered by the United States in the initial round of bombing. So like any hope for a peace plan now is like freaking gone. So all of this is a hot mess. And, you know, in addition to the fact that we need the War Powers Act resolution passed, period, that stops this in its tracks, there also just needs to be immense public pushback. And frankly, like the pressure is growing. If you're watching the regime's spokespeople out there on media and social media right now, they're all like floundering. Marco Rubio gave a pop-up press conference yesterday where he was more flustered than I have ever seen him. Like really kind of incapable of holding the story together, because the story he told yesterday was different from the one he told the day before. And the reporters are the same people asking the same question, saying, wait a minute, what you told us yesterday is different from what you're saying now. So this is what happens when you have like a sociopathic narcissist in charge who's like, meh, let's go kill some people and see what happens. Right? There really doesn't seem to have been any forethought or planning about the effects of this. And then, of course, meanwhile, we have Pete Hegseth running around, swinging his dick at everything that matters, like mass violence, death and destruction raining from the skies. He actually said that latter part this morning, right? That, you know, we would be without mercy. You know, I'm just going to say, said it this morning on Blue Sky, if there's ever a war crimes trial for Pete Hegseth, the evidence is stacked up right now. Like he's making his own prosecution in real time. So we will have to see what happens next on that front. But, you know, I also just want to remind you all that, you know, it's a good moment, because this is how we get through all of this, to stay very focused on your own local activism, right? Because if you pay attention to this stuff all the time, it's very easy to like spin out, right? Like World War III. I cracked some jokes about this yesterday, honestly, in one of the groups that we run inside the Ripple Effect Institute, because gallows humor helps, right? But, you know, like if you spin out into all that stuff, they're going to steal the entire midterms. The world is going to hell and we're in World War III. You will be frozen. You will be in a trauma response from now until like, you know, he dies, whenever that may be, right? And probably beyond that if we end up with President Vance. So good idea to stay like very, very focused on what you can do locally right now to make a difference, whether that's like volunteering as a precinct captain, you know, like getting trained for rapid response, working at your local food bank, right? Checking in on your immigrant neighbors. There's so many other things that you can do right now that are going to make you feel grounded and cared for and in community with others. And like, we need that now more than ever. Like, that's actually really how we get through all of this. Okay. We did a video yesterday on the channel for the Ripple Effect Institute that's also like in my post section here on YouTube about how to evaluate your risk in terms of the types of activism that you might want to engage in right now. We're getting an enormous amount of positive feedback on that video, by the way. I'm really glad you guys seem to like it, but it talks about a risk ladder that you can use to evaluate your own risk in terms of the kinds of action that you want to take. There's very low risk things for people who are marginalized and under threat, medium risk things that you can do, high risk things you can do if that cost benefit analysis works for you. And for many of it, it does. So go watch that video if you would care to. And I will also just mention that we have a brand new, I'm going to link it in the comments below after the video, a brand new free masterclass on how to stop guessing how to make an impact. That really takes you through the steps that you need to evaluate in terms of like where you live, what your life will allow for, your own bandwidth, your own time, the issues that matter to you the most, on how to actually keep making a difference in this era. So it's called Stop Guessing How to Make an Impact, How to Choose Your Cause so you don't get pulled into every crisis. And I will make sure that the link for that is below. It's totally free. All right. So I will catch you guys back here on Friday. Thank you all so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, make sure that you're like taking care of the people who matter, and particularly the people in your life who are really scared and vulnerable right now, all right? And I will see you all back here then. Thanks so much, everybody. Don't forget to like this broadcast and subscribe if you haven't already. Okay, bye. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.